The Tampa Bay Buccaneers open mandatory minicamp, and Randy Gregory is already a no-show. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at EKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Evan, of course, is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. And Locked On Bucs is here with you usually Monday through Friday, 3 days a week right now, at least 3 days a week. But of course, want to thank all of you for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No ads, no hashtags, no agendas, no nothing. Just texting with me. Who doesn't want to do that? Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Some of Evan's biggest takeaways from the start of mandatory minicamp, and is Todd Bowles already a hot seat candidate? That's coming up in a little bit, but let's start with the biggest news of the day, and that is that Buccaneers' new edge rusher, Randy Gregory, was not in attendance at the start of minicamp, and the absence was unexcused. Head coach Todd Bowles said that the Bucs were going to deal with it, but Evan, this is not a great look for someone that the Bucs brought in here and already has a history of various issues at pretty much every stop along his career.
Well, currently he's suing the NFL. So that's also a variable that we don't really know much about behind the scenes of what that's doing. Typically when an employee is suing the employer, it's an interesting dynamic, right?
That's one way to put it.
Not certainly he's not suing the Buccaneers, obviously, but the NFL as a whole, you just wonder. But regardless, it is pretty concerning that Randy Gregory is not here, considering his history in the National Football League, his resume of what he's done in the past. Even though we heard from him after signing, he had great perspective. Seemed like he's grown up a lot, and it's taught him a lot of lessons. But for a man that has not been with the Buccaneers, doesn't know any of the teammates, doesn't know Bowles in the system. It's a very complicated system. Even if they just say, "Hey, we're gonna tell you to run one play and that's get after the quarterback," right? To still not show up is without really knowing what's going on behind the scenes. But if there was something to give him the benefit of the doubt, I would imagine that Todd Bowles would have covered for him, like he has done a million times for other players. I mean, he just covered for Devin Tompkins after everything that happened last week, and when asked point blank after mandatory minicamp, he said that he wouldn't even confirm that he knew about the alleged domestic violence stuff by his ex-wife, and just ultimately said that they had a conversation, right? So the reason I bring that up is just saying that Todd Bowles will allow an exit ramp, will allow an ability for kind of the media to get staved off or to not make something bigger than what it is if he can control that when asked. And he did not do that with the Randy Gregory thing. He said, this is an unexcused absence. We're going to handle it internally. It's right. It's, of course, it's disappointing when someone doesn't show up and, they'll just deal with it. That's not a good sign. So to me, we'll see. He might show up day 2 and everything's okay. But I don't think that the Buccaneers, and judging by how the Devin Tompkins thing was handled as well, even in something that was an alleged charge, even something that, it was an injury designation, but something reading between the lines, it does seem like they wanted to distance themselves to a very proactive measure, even before many people knew about it. The Buccaneers don't want to worry about this stuff. So let's just see. But it is concerning, especially given that it is at one of the most concerning positions on the team, the outside linebacker position, where they desperately need production. Because as I've stated on here multiple times, I think getting after the quarterback, getting some sacks, forget about the pressures, and forget about the sacks that Bowles has to divvy up because of his exotic schemes. Just one-on-one, I'm a problem. You have to scheme for me, this player, this one guy. I think that's the difference between the Bucs being a legitimate Super Bowl contender and just potentially a divisional winner. I think that's the gap. So, the Buccaneers won't allow this to be a bigger issue than it needs to be, but it's a problem right now, and we'll see what happens day 2 and day 3.
Yeah, certainly there could always be extenuating circumstances, but I think if that was the case, like you said, Todd Bowles probably would have covered for him a little bit. They would have gotten some sort of heads up somewhere at some point. But someone that was in attendance was, of course, Tristan Wirfs, but he wasn't practicing. Bowles said that Wirfs wasn't a player that they needed to see. Not really surprised there because he's arguably the best left tackle in the NFL. But to me, this really isn't a big deal with Wirfs not participating in practice while he's waiting for a new contract. And I have to think that's something that they're working on still. I'm sure it's going to get done before Jason and his family go on vacation next month. But, any issues, that you see from Wirfs?
Yeah, James, your mic's kind of went out over there, but I think what you're ultimately getting at is anything change. I don't think this is a big deal, as you mentioned. Even if it gets down to training camp, the prevailing thought is he would play under that 5th-year deal. The Buccaneers don't have an extensive history of paying players out, much earlier than what they can do, right? The Devin White situation was way murkier than what Tristan Wirfs is going to be. And even Devin White was there day 1 last year of training camp. Devin White was there in street clothes for mandatory minicamp. So there's a part of it where if Tristan has not been a part of on-field workouts for the entirety of OTAs, why are you going to throw him out there in mandatory minicamp when your teammates have about 9 practices, or whatever it is, 7 practices built up, 7 to 9 built up, and then you're going to go on day 1 versus their day 10, where you're kind of ramping things up, is the most the most intense you're going to get this entire offseason before training camp. So at this point, there is only one route, and that's, hey, sit back, watch, do the mental reps, whatever. But he is so talented, it's not going to matter. Training camp's going to come. He understands, he's in the meeting room. He's not not at One Buck Place. We know he's there behind the scenes. And this will all be resolved. And, if a contract comes or not, that's whatever, my position has always been, the longer that the Bucs wait, the higher the number is just going to get for Tristan. So any more benchmarks that are made in between the time that the Bucs sign him now to when they actually do sign him, that's just going to add another, handful of million, right, to the pile. So regardless, they're paying that man. Jason Light, I'm sure, is telling you, I promise you on everything I got, you're going to be a Buccaneer for a long time. We're going to treat you well. We're going to pay you as the top seeded guy. But, the NFL has this ability of fifth-year options on their first-round picks, and we're going to take advantage of it. And I'm sure there's some cap gymnastics that go into that, but that's why I just want people to understand why there's a difference between Antoine and Tristan. Even though they were in the same draft class, Antoine didn't have a deal, after the season, or entering this season. Sorry. Tristan does because of that option. So that's the only distinction. And he's making 18.2. So it's not like, it's peanuts here. Just like Devin last year was getting, not the money that he wanted, but in the grand scheme, a lot more money than he probably deserved based on the production.
And a heck of a lot more money than he's getting this year based on that production. So
correct.
Yeah. I mean, 18 million chump change. That's nothing. All right. We are going to get more of Evan's takeaways from the first day of mandatory minicamp, including the debut of the newest Buccaneer. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Some of you probably saw on Twitter that I was able to take my son to Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals so that he could root on his Celtics. I would love to take him to an NBA Finals game in Boston, and getting the tickets on Game Time would be the easy part. It's the rest of the trip that would be difficult to figure out. See, with Game Time, I could wait until the last minute as prices begin to drop, or even wait until after tip-off when the prices go down up to 60%. And right now, you can get Buccaneers tickets for the upcoming season for less than $60 each, and that's with all-in pricing. The process is as easy as you can get. You can use Apple Pay and have the tickets on your phone in just 2 clicks, and no surprises either. With all-in pricing, you will know exactly what you're going to spend when you're looking for the seats that you want to sit in. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every dayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. Plenty more to discuss, including some more love for Tristan Wirfs. I'll have more on that on tomorrow's episode. But in the meantime, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. We're talking NBA Finals. We're talking Stanley Cup Finals. We're talking Randy Gregory. Not really. They're not talking Randy Gregory, but Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Lots of Locked On Celtics and Mavs on Locked On Sports today. And I have to say, both of those shows have been absolutely outstanding during the NBA Finals. Even if you don't have a dog in the fight, if you like basketball, check those shows out. They really have been very, very good. But lots more to discuss, Evan, regarding minicamp, including the debut of former Giants and Oklahoma Sooner wide receiver Sterling Shepard reuniting with Baker Mayfield. And this is the first time we've spoken since that signing happened. So what did you think of the signing? And then anything noteworthy of Sterling there on day one? Is really his first time with any offseason program with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I mean, Sterling Shepard was talking about how his head's spinning a little bit, right? He signs officially at the beginning of the week and then jumps into this Liam Cohen offense, which, by the way, between Baker, Rashad White also confirming, saying it's a hard offense to learn. We've made so many similarities between Liam Cohen and Dave Canales about what the offenses look like, but it is worth mentioning that there is definitely a difference felt behind the scenes about what these guys need to learn and the communication necessary. So I say that because Sterling Shepard then gets thrown onto the field like one day in, And if everyone else is like, yo, this is hard, even if he's going on his 9th year in the league, well, it's going to be a lot for him, especially for somebody who, to his quote was, I was in straight up daddy mode. He was on the couch and got the call from the Bucs and was brought in. So I like the signing. I don't want to make a bigger deal of it than it is. He is a veteran in a wide receiver room that is very young. Outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, it's really first and second year dudes. So I think it's nice to bring in a veteran presence. Very respectable, someone who great word of mouth type of guy, good for the locker room. And the big concern, obviously, are injuries with him. Now, he really didn't have that issue last year. His production shows that. He only had 57 total yards. He had about 125 snaps, I think, something like that. I can get the firm number here. 142 snaps last year. So in a reserve type role, I think he's very useful because you don't have to worry about wear and tear. A guy that had last 3 seasons a mixture of turf toe, torn Achilles, and torn ACL. But he's a guy that you can throw out there to really build like a specific package for him. You're talking 142 snaps over 17 games. I'm not great at math, but what are we talking, like 8 plays worth that he's getting on the field? Make a couple of things that are his bread and butter, and allow him to kind of just have a really small role in this offense while Chris and Mike get breathers throughout the game. So I think that's a nice addition. And if for some reason Chris and Mike go down, then at least you have a veteran presence already in-house that knows the offense, who, if he does not get injured, we know what his ceiling looks like, the potential he can do. He can snatch a lot of balls. And I think that in this Liam Cohen offense, of just kind of how they want to have a fairly low average depth of target in some of these plays, he's going to really thrive in that role where he mentioned, I haven't even been utilized inside as much as I think I should be. So he's gonna get a taste of that with this offense, and I think it really helps kind of fit his strengths. But yeah, not the world's biggest deal, but just a savvy signing and a man who's gonna pick and choose his spots throughout the year to make an impact for this team. And maybe that's a first down here or there, whatever it might be. Don't expect him to be this, world beater of a number 3. I fully think that Jalen McMillan's going to be that 3. I think he's actually pretty much locked into that spot. So I think that it's going to be really him as that number 4, competing with Trey Palmer, who I think will have his own package, strengths that work for him. And then, of course, Rakim Jarrett, also somebody who this team has been high on since last year, bringing him in.
Yeah, I mean, when the signing happened, I equated it kind of to David Moore and Brashad Perryman, like that kind of role. He's going to get a couple of snaps, might have a couple of awesome, big time plays. But other than that, it's going to be pretty limited. It's just nice to have that presence and that player that obviously already has a rapport and a trust built up with the quarterback. So we've talked about Randy Gregory. We've talked about Tristan. We've talked about Sterling. Now, outside of that, I mean, what any other big takeaways for you from the first day of this mandatory minicamp for the Buccaneers?
Jalen McMillan caught a corner touchdown from Baker Mayfield, as I just kind of mentioned. It just seems like he's solidifying his spot as the number 3 on this team. Love what I've seen from him throughout OTAs, minicamp. He seems like a dude. He just seems like he's going to be a great part of this offense. Cade Otton had a magnificent one-handed grab. He also had a drop, but he had a handful of really nice catches, and one being a one-handed grab deep down the field. That was oh crap, I didn't know that Cade could do that. I I think Cade Otton will be better in year 3, especially because maybe his role will be reduced a little bit. Hopefully he's not playing like 97% of snaps as a tight end consistently. That's a lot. And then, Vita Vea's weight is down. Now, he joked with us. He didn't tell us what weight he's at now. But the hope is he will be able to play more snaps and more third downs at a lesser weight. So will he still be the dominant run stuffer at a lesser weight? We'll see. But he looks good. Now, other than that, it's hard to really deduce a lot in underwear football.
Sure.
But you're just kind of judging the bones of it. And I like what I see. And the as I keep saying, the one kind of caveat is when everyone's kind of telling me this is a complicated offense, I'm very curious how to see what this looks like when pads come on, after the first week of training camp, to really see these guys go to work, and especially those mixed scrimmages between the two Florida teams, like that will tell us a lot. So we know this offense, if you just watch the Rams, because the players even tell us they get a lot of clips from the Rams of what they kind of do. We know what they want to do. We know it's a successful offense when run. Is there going to be a learning curve to enter the season? Is this a team that needs to really weather the storm before kind of figuring it out in the back half? That remains to be seen, but those are just sort of my early impressions out of the gates of what I'm seeing and what we're hearing from the players and even the coaches before OTAs even started.
Well, Todd Bowles' name is already being thrown around as one that could be on the hot seat. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on the WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs. James Yarcho, Evan Klosky, and Mina Kimes of ESPN was talking about her top 5 coaches on the hot seat, and surprisingly, she mentioned Todd Bowles. On her show, Kimes said, quote, "The Bucs basically are running it back. If they're really bad, I don't think they will be, so I want to be clear." Kudos to Mina for that one. But if that were to happen, he is a guy I could see them saying, this was a mistake, end quote. Now, personally, I can't say that I think Todd Bowles is on the hot seat, but I also think that comes with a caveat, right? Like, the Bucs could miss the playoffs, and in my opinion, I don't think he's getting fired. But if they miss the playoffs because they finish 4-13, they were getting steamrolled every week, and they come in last place in the division, well, then, obviously he's a candidate to be fired because that is a massive, massive regression. So I think there's a difference between the hot seat and the potential to lose your job if everything goes awry. But Evan, do you consider Bowles a hot seat candidate for this year?
If we're judging it by going 4 wins in the season, I don't. Let's say it like this: it's not like Todd Bowles is 100% safe entering the season, right? There are circumstances where they can miss the playoffs, as you mentioned. Let's say they go, let's say they get 8 wins, and let's say it's a slow kind of start, and they have a strong second half. Offense got better. We were able to chalk up these little excuses to why things happen. Maybe there are injuries, whatever. There's a lot of nuance. I kind of leave that into the. We got to leave the context, right? If they jump out to a 7-1 record and then fall off and win one game the rest of the way, that can also be a firing position. But yes, he's not 100% safe. He's going to have to earn his job. And I do want to add also the caveat that so many teams hired new coaches this year that there aren't many people to talk about as far as coaches who potentially could be fired. Like Todd Bowles at the top of the list of guys who, I could see this happening because
half the league has new people. And unless you're, the Carolina Panthers, who are, you never know what they're going to do, considering Frank Reich was given like 11 games. You can cut the league in half, and then you look at the coaches from that clip, and then a large portion of those coaches have made the playoffs or on teams that made the Shanahans, the Tomlins, the McVays. Think about some of the big names out there. You could just cross them off, right? They're not going to leave. They're not going to be fired if they have a bad season. So that leaves like a tiny list of names, and Todd Bowles would be a part of that tiny list. Like, if you tell me right now Todd Bowles gets fired at the end of the season, I'm not going to be shocked. But on June 11th, as I'm saying this out of my mouth, he's not on any sort of hot seat. The hot seat's going to have to generate due to bad play. It's not that he's entering the season on the hot seat like he was last year, where it was like, you need to prove to us you're a coach. Even entering the playoffs, we weren't 100% sure that he was going to return, right? Like, he had to win a playoff game for us to be like, finally, we can stop talking about it. So that's just the truth. But certainly right now, as I'm looking at it, I'm not thinking in my head, man, Bowles better bring it. I think he deserves like a little bit of grace, but certainly he cannot survive a 4 or 5 win season. He's going to get nixed because you do not invest in this strategy of running it all back, paying Baker Mayfield, doing all these things to get worse, right? The Buccaneers had this window of maybe we're going to regroup, restructure, and then they had the season they had last season, win a playoff game, and they said, you know what? Everyone's coming back for the most part. They traded Carlton, but pretty much we're taking these same bodies and we're going to make it better. So I want to see Todd Bowles and his defense improve, because actually the last couple of years, I feel like it's taken a step back, and Todd was humming with this defense when he came to town. And I want to see some of that get a little bit better. So it's, the defense has to also improve as well, because, in this day and age where teams are hiring offensive coaches, it's a lot of times when you have a defensive head coach, you continually lose these beautiful offensive minds. We saw it happen to Dave Canales immediately. And Liam Cohen, if they have a 12-win season this year, the Buccaneers, and offensively they're amazing, Liam Cohen's going to be on head coaching lists. Like, you're constantly going to lose your offensive coordinator by having a defensive coordinator as your head coach. So I'm not saying that it's like the worst strategy in the world to have a defensive coordinator. I'm not saying that it's going to absolutely ruin you. But that is the other side of the coin of where it becomes dicey. Like, when you get Sean McVay, at least you always have Sean McVay. You always have the offensive mind that's better than everybody else. Do people value defense that way in the current NFL? I don't know. So that's what's working against Todd Bowles from a philosophical standpoint, not even like a Todd Bowles standpoint, just how the league is, where it's going, what organizations are looking for, and why it becomes problematic to continually turn over these amazing offensive minds. And you can only do that for so long.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a great way of looking at it. And going back to your original point, you take a look at all of the new head coaches, and you mentioned Dave Canales. He could be a one and done, but we're not going to see that very often. So it's like, well, what other coaches could you name that could be on the hot seat? I mean, Mike McCarthy,
for sure,
is certainly going to be a name that gets thrown around there.
And he's a guy who's entering the season on the hot. That's like the difference between Bowles and McCarthy. Like, there's no doubt McCarthy has to have a great season or else he's canceled. And that's playoffs included. So that's a great example to bring up of where my distinction is of like McCarthy, like entering the season hot seat. Bowles, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, well, and you and I were chatting earlier in the day, and I'd even said I don't think it's playoffs or bust for Todd Bowles. I think Todd Bowles could be back as the head coach next season, even if the Bucs don't make the playoffs. And 4-win, 5-win seasons are not all made the same. If the Bucs win 5 games because Baker got hurt, Mike got hurt, Antoine got hurt, Levante got hurt. It's like, okay, I mean, there's only so much you can do at that point. But if everyone's healthy and the defense is allowing 31.5 points a game and the offense is only scoring 16.5 points a game, like, okay, we're going to see some wholesale changes here because of the structure of the way things went. So, yeah. And, I hadn't thought about the defensive-minded head coach in that sense before, but that's a really, really great point. Something I have mentioned on the show before is, Liam Cohen very well could be like, this was the offensive coordinator we hired with the future in mind, that, when Todd Bowles, not even, if we fire Todd, but if Todd were to retire and move on and be done with his career in coaching, we have a head coach in waiting. But yeah, the Bucs go 12-5. You could be looking at Liam Cohen in Dallas being their new head coach now.
Yeah, and Todd has been very open with the fact that he doesn't have many years left in him, right? Yeah. That he's not going to be hanging around forever here. Like, I feel like even within the next 5 years, at some point, he's retiring. Whether, this is probably his last job, the Buccaneers.
Yeah,
I think this is it for him. He's going to ride this. Hopefully, he can ride this out and finish it on his own terms. And if he does that, I think that on his own terms, by certainly by like 2030, he's out, like by his own accord. If and then we can talk about whether he's pushed out or he forces a hand from the organization to fire him. But there is an element of maybe, if you're so successful and you can figure it out, of kind of convincing Liam, and let's say the offense is humming and, you make it to the NFC Championship and you're so close and all these things, and he's fielding calls and he's the new Ben Johnson, right? Maybe there's a chance of being like, Liam, I don't have many more years left in me. Like, on the low, like, you're a guy when it's all said and done. But, can you stick with us for another couple of years, whatever it might be? So can you try and push for a Super Bowl with us and not leave us? So I would love to have those conversations on Locked On Bucs. If we're talking about them going to the NFC Championship game and falling a little bit short and then making that progress, if Liam Cohen's in those discussions, that's a great thing for Buccaneers fans. It's just, that's the inherent problem of having a defensive head coach.
All right, that is going to do it for this episode. Evan, what do we have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com?
Yeah, I mean, we got the final 2 days of mandatory minicamp with the Bucs. We'll be out there. We'll be covering that because once that's all said and done, we won't see him again for another 6 weeks. And then tough season for the Tampa Bay Rays. Currently, I have an article right now at 10tampabay.com about what the Rays really should do with the trade deadline coming up at the end of July, and why this might be the only chance they have to really regroup and raise the ceiling of their team in the future, with a lot of star-studded prospects, so we think, coming along the way. So I suggest you check that out at 10tampabay.com. And again, you can hit me up on the X at eKlosky WTSP and send me your thoughts and tweets. And, I'll always respond as long as you're not a jerk.
And of course, we're on Stamkos Watch Day like 47.
Certainly when July 1 comes up, we will be, hopefully within the next few weeks, we got some good Stamkos news.
All right. Coming up tomorrow, of course, I will have some fun stuff to talk about with Tristan Wirfs. In the meantime, as Evan said, check out everything going on with him over on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. You can check out my work over at bucksnation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eKlosky WTSP. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.